Good morning, all, or I guess happy lunchtime to my friends in South Downs, Bryn Madoc, and others of you living in the future. And welcome to Kal-bardr's Corner for this episode of Coffee with Kal. I am Baron Kal-bardr Gellir, painting the Meridian Cross, painting the Argent Comet, painting the Pilgrim Star, painting the Palmer's Lantern, Defender of the West, and Reaper. Coming to you live from the southwest outpost of the Barony of South Downs, here on the beautiful southern coast of Meridies. And joining me for today's show is an actor, a comedian, a Nine Men's Morris commentator, and one of the two Bash Barons of Bryn Madoc. Welcome to Thegn Knut Bjornsson. Morning, buddy.
Hey, it's great to see you today and to see the screen where I hope the rest of you all are.
They're out there somewhere, hanging out.
They're out there. It's a big world.
Right. Knut, if you will introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and why you're awesome.
Absolutely. So I am Thegn Knut Bjornsson. I am one of the Barons of Bryn Madoc, CARCACCKBM. There's a bunch of alphabet soup that I don't remember off the top of my head. I wrote
mine down. It's easier.
Yeah, I did that one day, and my dyslexia kicked in and was like, hey, lots of letters.
Right.
I have been playing in this barony pretty much since I started and was named Baron back at the beginning of the year to help steer us in a new direction as we continue to move forward. It's a pretty good time. Right here in Bryn Madoc, otherwise known as Athens, Georgia. It's where you go if you want to be a national champion.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're doing it out early. Got it. Okay.
2 in a row, man. Two natties. That's breakfast in Athens. And now it's our football team too.
That's true. All right. Well, so first of all, Knut, thank you for being here. I know this is now the third time we've scheduled this show, and life keeps exploding on us. So we had scheduled it, we scheduled it before you became Baron, and then we're supposed to be for right after, and then that one blew up, and then the second one you got called into work. So it's been chaos.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine that when I reposted, she's like, "I'll believe it when I see it happen." And I was like, first of all, rude. We're trying here.
I'll get around to it. You don't have to pester me about it every 6 months.
I know, right? Oh, man. So before we dig into the show topic, I do want to talk about the most important thing, because this show is coffee themed. So let's talk about our beans, or in this case, whatever Knut's drinking over there. So for today, I'm keeping it simple. I think going back to the basics, I pulled the French vanilla out from 8 o'clock coffee. But most importantly, I grabbed my I Dissent mug made by Anya over on the West Coast. So I thought in our current political climate, in our current SCA political climate, it's appropriate to have an opinion. So.
Oh, that's a great mug.
Oh, yeah. It was one. I'm glad she. I hate that she ended up selling them after the fact, because she had a couple left over that got unordered or whatever. I was able to pick one up for a really good price too. But I like supporting the cause, And I think when she did it, she donated all the proceeds from them to some related charity. I don't remember what the charity is now, but it was a related charity to RBG when she passed away. So excited to be a part of that. Knut, what are you drinking over there?
So what I have today is, I need to get a sponsorship deal with these people.
Right.
I have a Monster Java 300 milligram. It's the triple shot mocha.
Jesus.
That'll be enough to get me through the day. And no, Knut, totally different guy. And I've got that inside of a little FDM printed mug that I made. That'll
nice. I like how the whole thing just slides down in there. That's badass.
Yeah, you just drop it in there. If you see me at events, that's what I do with whatever else I have. I drop it inside of a metal mug.
Right.
So you never know what's in there. It's usually Diet Coke or Mountain Dew until about sunset.
I was going to say, until it's time to not be Mountain Dew or Diet Coke.
Yeah. I'm off hard liquor, so it really narrows the band. It keeps the cup clean.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well, let's dive into today's topic. So, and for those out there watching, please let us know you're out there either in the comments or the chat, depending on where you're watching. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and if you've got questions during the show, comments to the ad, please do that. We'll pop them up on the screen as appropriate. I think the show we scheduled initially when it was less of a hot topic. I think it's becoming more and more of a hot topic as we move along.
Yeah.
But the idea of progress versus tradition. We're at 55 years, 56 years now, going on 57 in May of this society. We've got a lot of tradition to worry about, right? You as one of the two barons of Bryn Madoc now. Oh, speaking of, let me do that real quick before I forget. The views and opinions expressed here are those of participants and do not reflect any official policy or position of SC Incorporated, or in this case, the barony of Bryn Madoc. So Knut is talking as himself today, not as the Baron of Bryn Madoc. So they may share his opinions, but we are not counting on that necessarily. So I know one of your goals as Baron was to sort of look at this concept. And it's why when you pitched it to me initially, you're like, "Hey, I've got this thing we're trying to do." You and Simone, and so what's the passion for you? Sort of what's your concept? What's your idea?
So what I do see is that we have had these glorious traditions, right? We've been around for longer than I've been alive as a society. The ideas of medievalism have been around for a lot longer than that, right? There were medievalists pretty much about the time Elizabeth was stepping up in England. So we've got this tradition of kind of how medievalism is done, and then within the society, how things are done. And these traditions even have spread out into other similar activities. The ones that were splitting off in the 80s and things. A lot of these traditions are pretty hard and fast, and we do it this way if we're doing this thing. What I've wanted to look at, especially kind of here at the local and regional level, is what that looks like in a world that is changing. There are things that people did then that we don't do now. There are things people said, believed, that for the most part we don't do. And along with that, right, the traditions sometimes steeped in that have not always caught up.
Right.
And then we also have things that just don't work the same way anymore, right?
Yeah, I think one of the phrases that I heard early on was the Middle Ages the way it should have been.
Yeah.
Right, or the way it could have been, or the way it needed to be. And I think that's a great thing to look at, and not to disparage any of our costume brethren out there. There are some of those groups that started because those people disagreed with that concept.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason or whatever thing they disagree with, and whether you disagree with the wokeness of the world today, right? I think there's definitely some things in the Middle Ages that were not great. Slavery, sexism, racism, insert your isms here that were not great. To speak lightly there. But I think even when we look at just the SCA and how the SCA started,
mm-hmm.
and how it's changed, which first of all, if we look at how SCA started, they were all wearing pointy ears in a backyard barbecue.
Yep.
Just gonna throw that out there. So I guess like hard and fast rules. Like obviously, you and I don't have the ability to change big policy, right? I mean, we can affect it. We can maybe make some opinions, right? So, what are you doing? Or what are your goals? What's the sort of small changes you're looking to make along the idea?
So, a few of the things that we've kind of looked at, and a few of the things that are kind of big topics now, have been surrounding specifically moving forward with some of our traditional awards, right? This has been a conversation other baronies have had. We're figuring out what we're doing in that space. Because tradition, and a grand tradition in this game, is that you'll have an award given to a lady of the group and to a lord of the group for general excellence, for being awesome, for being wonderful and amazing and working hard. And that tradition maybe doesn't hold up as well in a world where we embrace that gender is a social construct, that the binary is kind of an arbitrary thing,
right.
Which is a discussion I have at work all the time, mundanely, and how to fit that into an award structure. So we've seen a few really amazing things, right? We've seen South Downs just going for, here's an award the populace votes on. And just remove
for the background of that. So South Downs did have now I just don't know what it was, but yeah, so they had a male and female one, and they switched it to, and even then when they had a male and female award, their concept was, we don't care what your you're born as, we're going to judge you on your identity, which was, I think, the first step is they judge the identity of the person, not the birth, that's cool. And that if they only went that far, bravo to them, right?
Yeah, that's still huge for a lot of places.
But they chose to take the next step, which was to remove the gender completely, and they created the Order of the Swift's Heart, and basically made all the people that were previously award winners of the two, made them the Order of the Swift's Heart recipients instead, and allowed them to move forward with that. Still keeping the idea of you get so many a year or whatever, so many per year. I think they do one per major event, so it's 2 a year is their concept.
That's right.
Which, if you've never seen it, and I don't know what your thing is for your award, like how you guys are going to ceremonialize it. They don't do theirs in court necessarily. They have all the members of the Swift's Heart come together with candles and go out and find the next person and bring them in. It looks badass.
It's beautiful in the feast hall too. That was amazing.
So sorry, continue. I wanted to.
No, you have the background, and I appreciate it.
Right.
So what we have done traditionally is it is done similarly that the two polling bodies, right, would be called into baronial court to conduct a piece of business. And the tradition is that there be either a beautiful neck pendant for Madoc's star, which is an award that was in the past traditionally and is still in policy, given by the Lords of the Barony to a lady of the Barony by unanimous vote. And then similarly, right, the Lord of the May, Lord of the Spring, Lord of the Winter, Lord of the whatever season it is a token, a belt token made by everybody. In that polling group. That's what we've done for years, and it's beautiful, and we're trying to find a way to preserve that now, while also moving forward and making it more inclusive. Right. We don't have to throw all the traditions away in favor of progress. It can be a little bit of both if we do it the right way.
Right.
And that's what we've kind of looked at is, because again, right, I read the binary idea as kind of whole cloth not making sense to me. Right. So we already treat it as the polling group that you identify most closely with of these two options, which is ripped whole cloth from the Women's Flat Track Derby Association's policies.
Right.
Because I ref for that a little bit. So I kind of ripped it whole cloth from that, and that's a starting point. That conversation's ongoing. And has been ongoing. I've heard baronages of other groups that were able to come in and completely reforge this idea. And they're putting together a third, wholly different option. Okay. So it's interesting that we're kind of in this world where, and it's not my business to discuss.
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting thought. I've never. So I am very much male, very, very much always been male. So I've never considered the non-binary idea. Yes. I mean, I am. My wife told me yesterday that I'm very in touch with my femininity, which I'm co-coach with. Like I'm wearing a dress for a skit in Gulf Wars because I'm a pretty princess. Don't get me wrong. But
you're great at it.
That's actually so. A quick offshoot. So Keith and I do cosplay a lot, and when we started doing cosplay, we wanted to do something weird. So all of our cosplays are gender swapped princesses. So I'm always a Disney princess. But I do a strictly male version of it. I make a male version of the character and try to imagine what that would look like. It gives us a little fun, and it also allows me to be a princess with a beard, which most princesses don't have beards. So, but I think, it's fun to play with, right? So, but I've never considered sort of the non-binary as a third group, mostly because I've always not wanted to other. Right, that was always a thing, and this is sort of on the idea of progress. Is how do you think about that? So Southdowns made a choice of just removing it completely. Some have made it its own thing, which allows the males, the females, and then the non-binary, to be its own thing. Which I don't know how I feel about that. That's a. Yeah.
I need to clarify. When I said a third option, I meant an option opposed to keeping the two groups or making the one. I do need to clarify. Yeah, no, that was not an other category, right? Separate but equal doesn't fly.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I don't know about that, but it's like it's an idea, but again, it's an idea moving forward.
Yeah, not one that I would jump on either, right? But no, this other group is pursuing a third way of addressing this.
Okay.
And I think what they're kind of drafting is beautiful, and I'm not going to let a cat out of the bag, but it's going to be really cool to see. So that's kind of one way that we can hang on to these traditions, this award given by the populace to the populace. I love that, right? That this is solely decided by that group, and I don't want to see that fade. But there are ways to preserve it as we move forward. And that's one thing that I love. You know, another thing is the grand old tradition that pointy hats don't move their own stuff. Right. This is a lot easier one to kind of look at and address. Right. Orlando, the previous Baron, could not stand being retained for.
Yep.
He'd do it. He'd let us do it, but he was doing us a favor because it was not in his nature.
Right.
End of his day, hard worker, prefers to do it. And we kind of see that as opposed to this model that I also find cool of making the hat look heavy, making the storytelling happen, right? Of we have retainers.
Right. Well, I think because it's the storytelling. We go back to the idea of this is a LARP. We're role playing here,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. At the end of it, this is collaborative theater.
Yeah.
And just making that work. So kind of seeing those, that's a thing I struggle with, is letting people do it, because I was the retainer for 7 years.
That was something, and by the way, I still owe you one at Gulf Wars this year. That was one thing that you and I talked about very early on before you were Baron. And when you became Baron, I was like, oh, he's going to catch this one now. Because when I became a court Baron, you gave me all ends of shit about it.
Yeah.
And then you became a landed Baron, and I was like, oh, turnabout's fair play, sir. Because I think it's relevant. I think that concept of that is a tradition we can uphold. But what I ask is, can we do it respectfully, right? So the idea of, yes, let them carry your stuff, but maybe don't expect it.
Yeah.
I think that's the balance, right?
I think that's exactly where that sits. It's the same idea as going to the gas station where they always give you a discount on something.
Right.
You don't ask for it when it's not there. I think that's the fair balancing point for royalties, like Tony's saying in the comments.
I was going to say, so in this case, we mean, by pointy hats, we mean landed nobility. So landed barons, landed principalities, or landed kings and queens, the landed folk who usually have retainers with them. Us lowly court barons do not need retainers, apparently.
I have retained for Baron Kevin before. Oh, he was furious. Who, by the way, is a court baron.
Yeah. Oh, I love Kevin.
I love picking on him, and he loves picking on me. We have a blast.
Yeah, but yeah, you let me know when at Gulf Wars you want me to retain for you, Knut. I will happily come and throw myself on that sword.
Okay.
But the idea, so looking at the progress registration, right? So I think in Meridies right now we have a few sets of much younger landed nobility, right? And you know, if we look at our king, our king and the queens, that's always going to be decided by the sword. That's a whole different discussion. But we can't necessarily control the age of that. We can control a little bit the age of our baronages, in that we can bring in newer, younger, in this case, rapier fighters, right? So an offset, an artisan, a non-fighter, to sit in these thrones to affect change locally or regionally in this case. And so I know yourselves and also the current Baron and Baroness of Thor's Mountain are both fairly young. I mean, in their 30s, which for me is still young because I'm only 30. It's fine. But it puts us in, and this is not speaking against our older folks, but it puts us into bringing those younger mentalities onto the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think looking at things like the retainer idea, looking at things like the award structures and what's new, what do we need to bring in that's new, what new things we need to consider. But I really appreciate you in this, when you brought that up, you're like, I want to do something new, but not just because I'm the new guy here.
Yeah, right? No. Change for no other reason than to change things doesn't do anything. Similarly, standing on tradition just because it's what we've always done, that turns things into a zombie, a walking corpse. I think I'm stealing that from like Winston Churchill or some other historical figure we look up to way too much in this world.
Yes, tradition is just peer pressure from dead people.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And then, right, conversely, on the other side, right, we'll look at the words of the brilliant actor Topol, who didn't write the words, but he delivered them. Without our traditions, we would be as shaky as a fiddler on a roof.
Right.
There's a balance between them, and that can be hard to strike. But some traditions kind of have to go. Anybody who's seen Fiddler on the Roof, right? Really good examples.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is a real dichotomy that we run into. We had to face that head on 10 minutes before our investiture.
Oh, wow.
We were lining up. And the last investiture I had seen was this grand ceremony. There was this almost liturgical delivery of the histories of a speech from the past to the new barons coming in, who, granted, right, Orlando had been there at the founding.
Right.
But this is the first time stepping up into that office. And it was said to me by a wise person, Orlando, yeah, dude, we've been making that up every time. We're going to make it up again. Okay. The tradition is we shtick, and it's beautiful, and we kind of make it work. I had no idea.
Right.
And it was a beautiful, quick investiture. We did this thing quickly because there was much more important business. There were members of the populace to thank.
Right.
So,
so I think that's, again, I think looking at the balance there, right? You want to maintain the traditions of the barony and show those, and show that you as a new young person, right, are supporting the traditions from the Orlandos of the world.
Yeah.
But then also make sure your focus is on your job.
Yeah. And that is exactly one of the things I've reached out to a lot of my predecessors. And one of them pointed out to me in no uncertain terms that at least when he started, at least partially, he was doing this to woo women. And they've been married longer than I've been alive.
Right.
So he just pointed out, some of these traditions you're asking about are things people have just remembered when I did it as a joke to flirt with my now wife.
Right.
Well, it's stuck. So we have to look at where tradition comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those things, where do we get these ideas? The herald being inviolate, right? You do not run out as a herald in your tabard, in your heralding tabard, and fight.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Most people do not have their swords taped up in all white, which would look like a herald's baton. That's a tradition that serves a very valid purpose. It makes sure we're hitting people that we're supposed to.
Right.
The ideas of bowing to the empty thrones, beautiful thing, builds the world. Right? And then there are some other traditions that have had to change. There was fencing at Tournament 1, at Day 1 at the May Day Parade. And then we didn't see it again for 20-odd years.
Right.
And, right, the tradition of if you're going to fight here, it will be with Rattan. That was a hard fight. Tyvar Moondragon spent the prime of his life dealing with that.
Right.
And it wasn't just him. Of course, it was the rest of the people around him. It was Robin of Gilwell. It was all of these heroes. And they brought this sport, and the sport that I love to do. And that was where it came from. And, kind of speaking to the comment here that Genevieve's got in. Yeah. Agreeing how to keep that core of courtesy, honor, chivalry, how to define those.
Right.
That can be the hard part. And that was the hang up in fencing was, well, is it chivalrous? It's civilian combat.
Right.
That was part of the story. And
there's an interesting dichotomy on the heavy field. Speaking on the other side of this, looking at chivalry and, the idea of like death from behind, death on the ground, and so some of those odd rules. No, chivalrous combat is two people in an open field knowing fully well of each other. War is not chivalrous. In your case, fencing is street combat, civilian street combat. It's not meant to be chivalrous on its face, right? It can be. We see Olympic fencers, that are fully armed, fully armored, fully aware of each other. Mm-hmm. That's chivalrous combat at that point, right? But the core of some of these things is not necessarily chivalrous by that definition.
Yeah. Oh, and I do want to speak a little bit on that point. Yeah, this is civilian armed combat of the time. And a lot of what we do is based very heavily in like this 18th century Irish codo duello.
Hmm.
That's what a lot of it's built out of. We had to build that tradition. We had to build that structure. Sort of speaking to what Alfred's talking about, even now with archers, I love and respect our combat archers. I think it's an amazing thing to see a warhammer that's a yoga block on an 8-foot pole coming down at my head, and then hear ding, shit, and that guy turns around and leaves. It has happened.
Yeah, love and respect is not the word I would use for them because I hate getting shot in the face. But yes.
I'm not enough of a threat on the heavy field to be worth the arrow.
Right.
I'm a spear fighter and not a very strong one. So I don't get shot at. That is not an invitation.
Yeah, when
Actually, you know what it is? Shoot me.
I was like, when you're 6'3" and you have a giant gold helmet, you sort of stand out apparently, and I get shot in the face a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 5'8", and my heavy armor still looks like pickle barrel because it is, because I like the blue steel. It's light, it's fast, it's cheap. And it was a point of contention at one point, too.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't make myself a target. But I think archery, live weapons in general, is a huge thing. I have capital O opinions. Come look at my cooler sometime in camp. I'm a big fan of our live weapons community. That's what my partner does. She's now a marshal in training. And that's our thing. That's what she does during the day. And I think that it's huge that we be able to do that in the combat field, where an archer historically could take down just about anything they wanted to if they had a shot.
Right.
I think it's beautiful. And I'll fully admit I'm a codger about some of this too. I don't like rapier spears.
Right. I was like, I think we can. Again, looking at the idea of progress versus tradition, right? We talk about rules, right? So in our case, let's remove the medieval components and look at our sport, right? Either combat archery itself, war, rapier stuff, or heavy fighting. The idea is this is a sport first. So a lot of things we've had to put into place are safety rules for us to make sure we're not actually hurting ourselves. So the idea is the bar grills, right? Fencing masks. Fencing masks look stupid, in my opinion. I don't like them. I think they're dumb. But like, how else do you do that safely? You can't. You have to have a fencing mask on to not get stabbed in the face. The rapier spears is a great example of they're not really good. I'm not a fan of them personally, but some people are. But like, we did that for a safety reason, and we can argue the safety of A or B on some of that stuff. That's a whole different show too. But that's a progress thing, I think.
Yeah, well, I've actually got a dear friend, a member here in the barony, who plays HEMA as well, which is just the sport, right? Without the rest of it.
Right.
And he's been doing actual science on, some of those restrictions to see if they actually make sense.
Right.
And I will not present his findings because I don't speak engineer.
Yeah, I'm not a scientist, in fact.
Yeah, I do soft science, right? I'm a therapist in the real world. Like, I do soft science all day. I'll tell you that it's nice to be nice to people, but I'm not going to talk about like the tensile strength of rattan and the flexion point, and I just know that I don't like getting hit by them, and they look a little doofy.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's kind of one of those things. Also, I stood on that tradition argument. You can see my rapier salt memes if you go back looking.
Right.
But that is one of those things that is a change that I just have to accept. It's here. I'm going to deal with it, or I'm going to have to get out of the way. What I did for years doesn't work on that field anymore. I have to be ready for this new thing. And it's not a personal slight against me that we have these weapons, even though I have to remind myself that every time I walk to res.
Yeah, I'm mad I got hit by that.
Yeah.
They're legal, but I'm mad about it. Yeah.
I don't like it. I'm going to go get my own so that I can do that to you.
Right. So, which I think is the change, right? So, I think back to games like Magic the Gathering. Anybody who's a card nerd out there, one of the things they do with that game is they're always changing, they're always adding new rules, they're always looking at and reviewing the current things to look at the meta, right? So when some new technology shows up on the SCA field, either side, we go, oh, that's the newer, better thing. And you start seeing a lot more of that thing. And then we look at new rules and new combat styles to affect against that thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we have to look at with the ideas of tradition, right? Tradition was Freon can helmets and fucking pool cues.
Yep.
That's not where we are today. So we've made progress to that. So we can't fight the same way. If you ask some of the Dukes around, they don't fight anymore, how they fought 30, 40, 50 years ago. Their fighting style doesn't work necessarily anymore.
Well, because we got to bring some modern stuff into it, right? The very way swords are constructed changed, right? Mm-hmm. Shaved rattan, injection molded plastic cup hilt. That's the meta for sword combat right now. Whether it's the one coming out of Florida or whether it's the one Ice Falcon's selling, those are game changers, right? It's a plastic bowl over your hand. People that were writing these rules, making this game, were, if they used a cup hilt, using a bar grill wrapped around their hand.
Right.
It's very different.
Yeah. If you guys ever fought with a big metal basket versus one of the plastic basket, that's a different sword swing, frankly.
Yeah. I still play metal basket just because it's what I was gifted when I started.
Right. It's what you got. It's what
I've got.
Yeah.
And I don't fight sword. I fought sword and board enough to authorize.
Right.
It's not my primary. I fought in one tournament in Atlantia.
So let's shift ideas a little bit. I want to maybe stay in the fighting realm a little bit, but I want to. You have a thing coming up I want to talk about, because I think it's a good concept to look at, right? So when we look at progress on the fighting field from the non-sport side, all right, we are medieval combatants doing medieval stuff, and I'm using medieval here because I'm a Scythian. I am way pre-medieval here, but medieval in this case. We're expected to meet certain standards of pre-1600s armor and sort of look, right? There's ways to do that and still have fun with it, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the concept of progress. We're going to have fun while maintaining the tradition. So I want to be a Power Ranger, in your case.
Yeah, that's happening.
But do it in a way that they could have done it. Right, that's the giant air quote. So to talk about that a little bit, sort of talk about the ideas of how to bridge that gap.
Plausibly, period, right? That's the idea that I've kind of seen passed around. Also, the idea of soft cosplay, right? We are basically Disney bounding this thing. For people that are not familiar, you can't wear a costume to Disney World as an adult. What you can do is wear normal clothes in a certain way. So what I'm doing, for instance, I have gotten a beautiful green tunic. I've put a big old white diamond on the chest. My fencing hood protection is going to be gold in color. Very much the Jason David Frank Green Power Ranger from 1994. Taking it a step farther, I'm painting my mask today. It's drying on my satellite dish outside because I live in Georgia. That's my paint drying rack.
It's also wet out there, so it takes forever for it to dry.
It's actually, the air is dry today and it's in the sun. It's the weirdest thing.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, the day star is shining directly onto my house. It's
nice.
So this sort of soft cosplay, and we've seen other people do it, right? We have a Laurel running around with a beautiful 16th century Italian Dory the fish dress. We have a Laurel running around with perhaps the best Maleficent cosplay I've ever seen, and it is 100% historically accurate.
Right.
And there's this idea, and even that's steeped in the old tradition. We're not wearing the pointy ears anymore, but we still have some whimsy.
Right. Yeah. So we're not going off and just wearing a cosplay in this case, right? Because you're going to a convention, you've seen the guy in the giant Warhammer suit, or you've seen these, which amazing, right? And that's I'm a nerd. I love that shit.
Yeah, I'm not fighting in a spandex suit.
Right. But when you see people who do, I've seen the Stelios does his Black Panther armor. And that's completely movie styled, but he's done it in a way where it's plausible. Like it's
Mhm.
probably could have done that. There's some obviously Wakandan things in it, right? And
Mhm.
you know, with the necklace or whatever. But yeah, Captain America and Black Panther. There's another Black Panther kid out on the West Coast, and because there's Stelios, and there's also another one out there that I've seen.
Yep.
I saw a guy out there he did a Mandalorian one. Now that was
Yes.
a step far, but God, it looked good.
Yeah.
But maintain that balance. So when I did, my girls and I did My Little Ponies recently, or about a year ago.
It's horrible.
But I was
love
like,
it.
how am I going to do My Little Pony on Scythian? So I started doing some research, and I found a child's version of their garments, what they would have worn, the sleeveless
Mhm.
tunic, whatever, and just adapted the My Little Pony themes into it. So obviously the trim on it is rainbow and not at all period, but it's in a spot and of a weird fabric that it could have been.
Mhm.
You know, the my cutie marks on the front is in a spot that's not at all period, like that. They didn't have that cutie mark that we've seen, but having decorations on that tunic and that tabard, that spot made sense, right? I think that's the concept we got to look at is how do we do the new funny things, right, for that us young kids want to do, but maintain that look back to the past, right? And you mentioned that early on when you're talking about the sort of your awards and the traditions of Bryn Madoc you're looking at.
Mhm.
How do you respect the traditions, right? And I think that's something that, and I'll be curious for Genevieve's comment on this. How do we respect our elders, right? How do we as young folks respect our elders and maintain that balance of the core ideals of the SCA,
Mhm.
but also respect our trans brethren,
Mhm.
you know, at the same time? Like how do we? That's a balance, right? And
And it's a hard one to strike for some people that
right.
want to make it hard,
Mhm.
right? At the end of the day, I truly believe that if we treat people like they are as human as we are, the choice becomes pretty clear for a lot of this. That's just right. That's just me talking. If we treat people as valid, like they deserve to be here in this space with us, then the choice for how to approach people certainly becomes a lot easier, right? That core of decency, I think, is one of those things that can be well exemplified here. It's also very easy for it to be swept under the rug under the guise of something else.
Right.
And that's a huge thing that I do work with a lot is how do we keep doing what we've done before, what worked, and how do we get rid of the things that didn't. Death to an organization is for the logic behind a problem solving question to be, we've always done it this way. Right. I grew up in a small country church. We've always done it this way. That's a dangerous phrase for a group that depends on being timely, on recruiting people from the modern world, right? You know, we're not going out to amped guard events and recruiting people.
Right.
We're going into the modern world and saying, hey, this is what we do. I think you'd enjoy it. And if we don't keep up, we will pay for that.
It's funny to me that a group built on research. So we are an educational nonprofit, right? That's sort of the core of the SCA. Whip everything else. That's what we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny to me that as our core, but yet we have that's the way we've always done it mentality. But when you ask further questions, they don't actually know why.
Yeah.
Right. Because if the answer is, you're talking earlier about, well, I did it as a joke one time to flirt with my girlfriend. Okay, cool. That's a good reason. That's a reason.
Yeah,
It
that
may not be a
tradition
tradition we care about now, but that's at least we now know, right?
Yeah.
I fought with this in the group here in Mobile for the longest time because we're looking at sort of the core day-to-day stuff, right? Reporting things and paperwork, this or that, right? Just sort of the business of the day. And I was like, well, why are we doing this paperwork this way? Right. But what we don't like it. Like we all agree we don't like this thing. Why? The response was, that's why we've always done it. And it only took me a little bit of research to go, well, it's because we're doing it wrong. Right. First of all, like just because we've done it that way doesn't mean that way is right. And doesn't mean that way can't be changed. Because I know from 56 years, we've changed a lot of rules because of things happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
We have,
make these
and
rules
that
up.
happens everywhere.
Yeah.
We learn better, we do better, right? I mean, when the SCA started, frontal lobotomy was still how you treated severe depression.
Right.
We figured something out. We got better at it. And there are things, I do want to be charitable here, not even charitable, I do want to be open. There are things that we have addressed, that we have gotten better about, right?
Oh, certainly.
Accessible sites, instead of having our events in whatever field would have us, right? Making sure that we have flushing toilets and accessible cabins if we're cabin camping. Those are huge. There was a time long ago that I was autocrat for a Dreamstone, which is our big signature event. Atlanteans, this would be equivalent to our baronial birthday, right? This is our big one. And we had never discussed having a specific accessible or needs cabin. And I couldn't believe I'd never thought about that. And I was asked by a dear friend, Sigmund Malovich of blessed memory. He asked, hey, if I agree to do the work, can you give us a building to do this and to accommodate? Go for it, right?
Right.
Big old Australian guy asking me a favor. Good friend of mine anyway. He was going to get what he needed. And anybody could have asked that and gotten it. And it worked swimmingly. And that was one of those things that I've now kind of made a tradition. My partner, Amicia, is working on creating a sensory space that is portable, so that we have a sensory, quiet, safe space at events. We're still working on the how.
Right. Which that how I think is the critical part here, right? I want to speak to, and I'm also curious on your mundane opinion on this too.
Lord,
there's a lot of stuff we're doing and can do right now, right? So there's a lot of things like the sensory space. We have the ability to do that right now. And I can do that maybe sometime. We can do that certain things, right? We can look at certain event sites to improve upon. Let's talk about golf forts for a second.
All right.
There's a big push right now from the trans community, from the colored community, to not use the Gulf War site because it's in a sundown town, and Mississippi's laws are very anti-trans in general, right? And that's a sum up of a giant problem, right? And I'm like, fuck yeah, how can we fix that, right? As an ally, as a supporter, I want to support those people. I also have to go, but also as a realist, there's not another good option for us to host Gulf Wars in this area, right? Because anywhere you go, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, anywhere in Meridius, frankly, has very similar laws, or are working on very similar laws. Fuck Tennessee.
Working on it.
Or
social worker, it's my job.
The big sites are church based or are in sundown towns, right? I can't fix that, right? I can do things to help these people, but I can't necessarily move Kings Arrow Ranch to another place. God, I wish I could.
I'd help you do it.
Right. Yeah, there'd be a crew to go pick up the land and move it if we could. So from your mundane side, like how can we support that, right? Support the people doing the work and that have problems, but also still have the SCA and have fun with it, right? And not just give up on the whole thing.
Yeah. So the thing and the reason that I'm here is because I think it can be done. I think that what we do, first off, we create almost a ritual space every time we step into an event, right? You know, this ceases to be, I'm trying to think of a state park that's not horrible. You know what? I'm going to use a local one, right? This is not the, nope, not going to name names. Going to be smart about that. This is not a state park named after, say, a historic atrocity. Right. Catch me off list. I'll be glad. Privately. This is not a park named after a historical atrocity. This is the place where a Dreamstone is. This is the place where our event is, right? This is the place where the fictional Shire of Newland has just always done their thing. And for that little while, it feels like that.
Right.
And we can create that ritual space. And I think the best thing we can do is in that time that we're there together, telling this story, dreaming this dream, that we make it as welcoming as possible. Right. That's our short term. That's what we do now. We make sure that it's not a problem when we're there. And then we always kind of have to have an eye to the future. You know, if I had the money, I'd buy a golf course, close it down and turn it into a camp. Working on it.
Yeah. And that's happened. We've seen that happen out west. They have the Kingdom Historical Trust something or other, but they just bought a big plot of land a few years ago and are working on developing a site that's an SCA specific site, but I mean, all other stuff, sure.
Awesome. And I've seen the idea done in here even, right? The idea is kind of in place with the construction of Dalwhinnie. I've seen it come to fruition in other places. In Augusta, we have actually, that's uncharitable. In Trenton, South Carolina, small town, there is a 27-acre park, which you can get a full tour of in my film Die by the Sword. And it's a village. There's an arena. There are halls. There are cabins. There are campsites. And the SCA has started using that site some in the area. People have been able to purpose build and intentionally create this. And it's just a lot, right? At the end of the day, in an all-volunteer organization, we couldn't.
Right.
So the best thing we can do is just choose collectively. And it does take all of us. It's kind of like herd immunity. You got to have an overwhelming majority. Damn near everybody. And in fact, it should be everybody in this case. Decide that while we're here in this space together, these are the values we have.
Right.
Inclusion, equity, decency, real courtesy, real honor. And I don't mean, are you insulting my honor by saying that I lied blatantly in front of all these people? No, real honor, real chivalry, capital C, doing the right thing, which is itself kind of a construct in a tradition. Knights were not historically the good guys all the time.
They were hired hands, effectively. They were mercenaries. If you want to go the historical route there. But yeah, you're right.
I mean, if we get really accurate with it, it was not always the nicest bunch of people. But this idea that we have built as it should have been, right? As it should have been means inclusive for everyone all the time.
So I think Genevieve made a great point here. Looking at, and this is where I talk about the idea of separating the SCA a little bit of our role play stuff from our business stuff, right? So in this case, the traditions of Bryn Madoc and the baronage is the tradition of Bryn Madoc. But what your A&S officer has to do, what your seneschal has to do, that's a separate thing. That has nothing to do with you as Baron, in my opinion.
No, it absolutely doesn't. My role here is gameplay. Right. I am an appointed character within the collaborative theater structure. Right. I cannot overrule a piece of paperwork. I cannot look at a waiver and say this is properly executed when I know it's not. Right. I can't hand wave that.
But in our structure, we have people that are wearing the pointy hats in this case, the shiny hats in this case, that can. Right. So our crowns, for lack of, and unfortunately by your hand, the crown selected you, right? So by proxy, you are part of that sort of problem structure.
I am. I can accept that I'm now within the system.
Right. And there's not a slight on you, but it's just
there are
accurate,
wonderful things about it. There are things that can change.
So our crowns have power to affect that mundane side of the world. And I think that's where I think we really can fix some of the problems is some of that separation. I think the issue we have in our diversity ideas, people leading our organizations are stick jocks. And I'll say that as one. Some of them are great. There are some of our crowns who if I had to pick somebody out of a crowd, I'd go, that guy. Let's pick that guy. He fits the bill, right? Or that girl, that person, that Billy Joe over there, right? And there are some that I would not want to carry a bucket for me because they can't manage it, right? But they can swing a stick good. I think that's that balance we can look at when we're looking at tradition versus SOPs versus our business side of things, which is what I'm hoping Genevieve means by that, and And if nothing else, that's what I mean by it. Because I think tradition, if we could separate those two, the tradition's a little easier to adjust over time, right? It changes anyways. Again, I think you can ask Orlando and them. He's seen the tradition change in his even few years as Baron.
Absolutely.
But SOPs need and have to change.
Yes,
as new political
policy.
Yeah, that's just what our country is.
Yeah,
300 years now, we've seen change happen.
Yeah, we're a nonprofit organization that carries a lot of insurance. We have to maintain both of those.
Right.
And sometimes that means that policy has to shift, right? The exchequer policy. I was our baronial exchequer when we switched to digital reporting. And talk about a pain in the tuchus. The first version of that spreadsheet was wonderful in a lot of ways, and there were things that did not make a lot of sense to me. The professional tax accountant at the time,
right?
And that did shift, and it shifted quickly right after I stepped down.
Of course, yeah.
Well, and that was for the best all around,
right?
But we've seen things that can change quickly, right? When we get new laws restricting behavior, we shift quickly. Look at what had to be done down in Australia for combat archery. They figured out what they could do and they did it. And I think we can do that with policy. I think gameplay and organizational policy need to be distinct in a lot of areas. And there are places where they do get muddled, right? We have a very rigid, for better or for worse, a very rigid authority structure. We're very top down.
Right.
And in certain parts of the country where there are cultural mores in place as well, that gets really, really rigid, really quick. And that can create problems, and it can create protections against problems. I see which way it goes more of the time.
Right.
But we are very top down. And what that means is that the people in a position of leadership, the people in a position, even if they're not leading anything official, that are looked up to, the best thing I can do is quote, and I cannot remember her name, but it's a former Queen of Ansteora from 86 or 87. She was speaking to the White Scarves, and she said, "Men, what you're doing today is what all those people over there are going to be doing next week. So it better be the right thing." And that was the way it was recounted to me. What I've seen written down did not have some of the same language.
Right. But that's true. I think that so the reason I went to do Scythian initially was one of the complaints here in Southdowns was that there weren't enough people that were big and in charge, right? I'm not in charge of anything, but I'm a big person, I'm a big voice.
Yeah.
There weren't enough people doing non-European cultures.
Yeah.
So some of us stepped up and did that. I think the concept of be that change you want to see, right? So if you want to see more, goofy cosplays, wear a goofy cosplay thing, but the right way.
Yeah.
Make that thing.
Well, and that can be a dangerous phrase if we're not careful. The right way.
Right.
That comes down to defining right, which is a whole different show. Book me for next week. We'll get around to it in 6 years.
We'll talk that way. in about a year, yeah.
Yeah. So that's just kind of one of those things is, if we do it respectfully. I did a Japanese persona for a while. And what I found is there was not a way for me to portray that character well, right? For me to portray my fictional individual living in those times. I still have the garb because it's super comfy, but there was not a way for me to do that.
Yeah.
Not a good one. So I still have the garb and I still wear it and it's super comfy. But yeah, it's a matter of finding, how do we do things respectfully, respecting the agency and reality of other people. If we can bear that in mind, that at the end of the days, these people were talking about being too woke to help them out, or these people that well, I don't want to offend anybody. They're people. They're our friends, right? It's one of the things that the discourtesy of 2020 really showed me was how quickly people got vitriolic toward groups made up of people that they hung out with 2 weeks prior.
Right.
And that really kind of, it changed the direction of my life, seeing all that. I'm like, well, I don't want to be part of that. And I chose to go and take my mundane career.
Right.
Being part of the solution with people. There is a very big thread on a large social media platform, and I read it today. And on that, there is a knight, from what I can gather, in like New York, who said perhaps the greatest thing. He quoted a section of the Havamal, sayings of Odin, right? A traditional thing that when you see injustice, you call it out. And then he thanked somebody for telling him to get off his hindquarters and change something if he had a problem, because he realized he was in the position to do it.
Right.
That was big. I hope that guy does come to camp. I have messaged him and told him he's welcome in mine.
Yep, it's a wish, and I guess this is the challenge, and we'll I'll just show plugs and some final thoughts here. The challenge is to, if you're out there and hearing this, be the change, right? Look at the traditions we have. Talk to the elders. Talk to the Orlandos of the world, right? There are plenty of them out there, especially those out on the West Coast. I've heard some of these stories. I've met some of these people. Talk to these people. Know why they did something. Understand the why they did something, and then look at it. Look at what we're doing now. They'll love you for it. Frankly, I know a handful of them that would embrace some of the new stuff you're doing, and would love you as Baron, because they're like, man, that's a cool new thing. Let's do more of that. That sounds fun, right?
Yeah, I'd love to see it, and I'd love people to reach out to me. Right, let me know if you're in Bryn Madoc, in Meridia's. Hell, if you're not, if I can be useful to you, right? Let me know. Reach out. People in these service positions are here because we want it, right? And no one goes through the baroning process and signs on for a 2-year minimum slog to not be here.
Right.
Reach out to the people. If you're worried you can't affect the change by yourself, ask the people that you need. Yep. Get your collaborators, your co-conspirators. It needs to be beyond allies. I can have that discussion all day. Get the people that you need and ask us. Pretty safe bet it's going to be a yes if I'm not actively doing something at that exact moment. And if I am, it'll probably be, yeah, hold this for me. Let's go do it.
Right. Or it's going to be, have you met Cal yet? let me introduce you to a guy. I got a guy you need to meet.
I can't say that out loud, but let me take you to my friend.
Right. Because he can. All right, let me do a couple of show plugs, and we'll do some final thoughts, wrap ups. I say show plugs. We're going to plug some other stuff, but so Gulf Wars is coming up next week. So I'll be leaving for Gulf Wars next Thursday, actually. But the war starts officially on Sunday. On Tuesday the 14th, myself, Duke James the Holy, and others will be joining the ridiculousness of the People's Parade of Gulf Wars. If the nobility get their fun parade, damn it, we're going to have one too. So we'll be lining up outside of Shadow Legion and Nova camps down Queens Highway. And about 8 o'clock, come hang out with us. Bring your floats, bring your throws. I'll have a bunch of beads to throw as well, so don't have stuff. I'll give you some. We're going to make a mess and have fun and end up at 5 Points by the Green Dragon. And then some of us will be going over to the Blue Feather Social that's also that night. We may just take the parade through there. Just take the entire parade.
I love it. Yeah. You just made my entire Tuesday night calendar. I love it.
Right, I know. So, yeah, I think we're just going to divert the parade through their social and then come back out. And then,
that works. Come pick me up before. Take me.
Yeah, there you go.
Properly. That's when I want you to retain.
Yeah, I'll pass by your camp on the way there, so it's not like it's hard because you're literally across the street from me. Cool. All right, done. And then Wednesday, if you're in for a little more reserved Lance Connect drunkenness, come out to the Renaissance Village, where I'll be hosting the Swag Gaming and the Corner Tavern, along with their Lands Connect party. That is Wednesday night at 8 p.m. till we're done. That night is also the Meridian Trimaris Social. So I'm going to go play some games for a couple hours and then go off and enjoy the social with their majesties and stuff. So, and that'll be in Trimarian camp. So come hang out with me in game, and then we'll go over there. Coming up next here on Kal-bardr's Corner. So I have no shows scheduled for the month of March. We should have 3 former fat guys, and I'll be speaking to them at Gulf Wars about when we're going to do that. The next Coffee with Cal is currently set for April 2nd. I'll be joined by the virtual herald, the Honorable Lady Jerusalem, to talk about Can't Stop the Signal. Yes, that's the Firefly reference. You're welcome for that one. That is off of her page, and I was like, that's a perfect topic. But we're talking about the idea. So we've talked a lot about these digital shows and sort of the digital age of the SCA. Jerusalem doing a lot of virtual herald stuff from back in the day. She was one of the very first virtual heralds we had. I'm talking about sort of what she's done with that and the concept of being that news source coming out of events from an accessibility standpoint and just an honesty that there's sort of the Herald and Violet standpoint of the world. So looking forward to sitting down with her and having that conversation. There will be a Road to Retention episode on the 26th. I don't have the banner for that up because I'm a slacker. And that is pending Remote is feeling better. She just got out of the hospital. Excellency Remote just got out of the hospital for, I think, gallbladder. Don't quote me on that. But I'll be checking in with her to make sure we're still on schedule for that. But keep her in your thoughts if you all will. Other than that, if you want to support Kal-bardr's Corner, KK Productions, and everything we support here, look us up on Patreon, patreon.com/KK Productions, and join the grand wall of patrons. You also can look us up on Redbubble by searching KK Productions. There's stickers out there, including the new Kingdom of Lolcats sticker made by one of the actual members of LOCAC. So check that out. Anything coming up in Bryn Madoc you want to promote there, Knut?
We do. So we do have our Dreamstone event. It will be, I'm looking at my calendar because that how I remember things doesn't make sense for most people.
Right.
Looking at April 22nd, that weekend, I believe we have our Dreamstone event. It's a huge time.
And that is in northern Georgia, correct?
That is in it's in the southern part of northern Georgia. It's at Hard Labor Creek State Park,
okay,
right off Interstate 20. So come on down. It's 10 minutes off the interstate. We've got cabins, we've got fighting, we've got fencing, we've got bardic, we've got feast, we've got court, and, well, you get to come see me. So y'all come on. It's going to be a great time.
There you go.
I will even give you the horror movie buff tour of the site if that's what it takes to get you to come here.
That sounds like a win to me, man. You get to hang out at the SC event and get a horror movie buff site. I love that.
Yeah, I'll show you all around it. I've given that tour to people that just kind of showed up while we were packing out.
That's fun. So, excellent. Cool. So that's what we got coming up. If you're in Meridia's or near the site, do that. If you see me at Gulf Wars, come find me. I'll have tokens to give out. Say, hey, aren't you that guy from TikTok or YouTube? And I'll give you a thing. Also, just come say hi. I like you guys are watching. But for today's topic, so some final thoughts. I gave my challenge earlier, but looking at progress versus tradition, I think I am a proponent of respecting the past, right? Mm-hmm. We have 55 years, 56 years tradition, and even more of that if we look at our medieval traditions and where our cultures come from. I think there are ways to do this respectfully, both of the traditions of the SCA and of the traditions of the people we are inheriting. So, those of us who are big white dudes, we need to be careful about what culture we take on and make sure we're doing that respectfully. Those who are big goofy people in the SCA need to make sure we're playing the mercenary game, but also doing it respectfully to the cultures of the SCA, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't know how to do that, ask one of us, ask somebody. We'll find you some sources. Knut, final thoughts?
Absolutely. So something that has been boiling at the back of my mind. At the end of the day, this game is full of well-meaning nerds. That is the overwhelming majority of us, and we're delightful people. And I just keep coming to mind the book Dies the Fire by S.M. Sterling, where we really kind of see where rigid tradition versus accepting the reality of where we are splits off in a major way. What I would encourage is that we maybe lean toward being the kinder, nicer, more reactive to our environment type, and not slip into recreating the travesties of the past.
There you go. This is all about having fun with your friends, folks. Let's remember that. But for now, that, my friends, is an empty cup. Remember, we dissent. Don't forget that. We appreciate all of you out there tuning in. Knut, you've been a blast. I appreciate finally getting you on. I look forward to seeing you again in about a year. I look forward to seeing you at Gulf Wars. Looking forward to hanging out and having a sharing drinking on the fire.
Oh yeah, come
in.
in
Watching. Come see us. We love you all. But until next time, this has been Knut and Kal in Kal-bardr's Corner. Have a good day, everybody.